Guyana in the Caribbean. Lush and mysterious rainforests, white and sunny island beaches, right? But how much do we really know about the history and culture of this region? Join us and together we'll go on a voyage of discovery. The cinemas of Guyana, the beautiful countryside. Do you recall what it was like growing up and living in Guyana in the 60s and 70s, and even into the early 80s? For most of us, it was blissful, peaceful, and much fun. A great part of this centered around going to the cinema. Do you remember the fun we had back then preparing for and then heading for the cinema? Who among you can remember those days? And how many can recall the names of the popular cinemas in Guyana? In our previous episode, we talked about the cinemas in Georgetown, but today we'll revisit those in the countryside like the East Coast, West Coast, Berbice, and the Corentyne. So, join me and let's take a walk down memory lane. Hi there, and welcome once again to the Aaron Darcy Project. This is where we look back at the history and culture of Guyanese and Caribbean people, places, and events. I'm your host, Andrew, and today we'll continue to look back at the cinemas. This time we'll revisit some of those in the countryside of Guyana. Going to the cinema was a really big event back in the days. Do you recall how we used to excitedly anticipate going to the movies? From the days of childhood to the times when as teenagers we had our first dates, and then as adults, the cinema was an exciting part of our lives. Movies were usually shown at 1 p.m., 5 p.m., and 8:30 p.m., but the evening shows were mostly reserved for older children and adults. It was the same in both Georgetown and in the rural areas. Sometimes, there would be a show at 9 a.m. on Saturday, but only during Easter or Christmas holidays. You could catch an Indian movie most days at 10 a.m., 1 p.m., 5 or 8:30 p.m. at the Liberty, Empire, and Plaza cinemas in Georgetown, and many people would travel from the countryside to go to these cinemas, especially if a new and very popular film was showing. The cinemas outside of Georgetown generally showed mostly Indian movies. Now, I'm sure some of us would recall that the pit or stall section was closest to the screen and was the cheapest ticket, and this is where most people went. Those stalls were filled most times. House, like an upper deck, was more expensive, and usually the girls, families, and adults would go there. Above that was balcony, which was even more expensive, but still got its fair share of patrons. In the countryside, as in Georgetown, cinemas offered cowboy, adventure, war, and Indian movies. But Chinese and karate films with stars like Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, and Chen Xing were also very popular, and there were usually long lines of people waiting to see these. When Indian movies with stars like Dharmendra, Amitabh Bachchan, and Rajesh Khanna were shown, there would be huge crowds at these cinemas. The Indian movies especially appealed to the population in those areas. The music popularized by these films encouraged fans to buy vinyl records, cassette tapes, and CDs with the songs, which were subsequently played in homes, shops, and bars. Indian movie music has played a very important part in the development of the Guyanese culture. But now, let's revisit some of the cinemas that used to be in the rural areas of Guyana. See if you remember any of them. Now, most of Guyana's population lives along its Atlantic coast, and as you travel along this coastal highway, you will pass through many villages. How many of you remember the Starlight Drive-In? Just east of the city, at a village called Montrose, we had Guyana's only drive-in cinema, the Starlight Drive-In. The Starlight opened in the late 1950s with the movie Blue Hawaii, starring Elvis Presley. This cinema became a very popular spot for young people and families who had cars. People would travel long distances to see a show at this drive-in cinema. Further east, along this same route, was the Melanie Cinema in a village called Melanie Damashana. This village was named for Melanie Burnham, one of the then president's daughters. The Gem Cinema was in Enmore. The K Dana and Triumph and Lakshmi Cinema was somewhere in that general neighborhood. The Atmos Cinema was in D. Edward Village, West Coast Berbice, and the Ritz was in Rossignol. Rossignol is the town that is on the western side of the Berbice River. New Amsterdam, a major town on the eastern side of the Berbice River, used to have 4 very popular cinemas. These were the Foz, built in the 1960s and which was located on the Strand, a major street in New Amsterdam. The Gaiety was at Main Street and Theatre Alley. The Globe, also on Main Street, which was destroyed by fire. And number 4 was the Olympic. As you leave New Amsterdam, you get closer to the eastern end of Guyana, the Corentyne region. This Corentyne region borders Suriname and is a rural and mostly farming district, and also had its share of cinemas back in the days. Rose Hall Village had two cinemas, the Apollo and the Cosmopolitan. The Cosmopolitan closed in the 1950s, but was later used as a church during the 1960s. The Rivoli Cinema, originally called Krishna Mahal, was located at Sheet Anchor Village, not far from the Kanji Creek. The Raj Mahal was in Kanji Village, and the Roop Mahal was in Port Mourant. Wim Village had the Lotus Cinema, formerly known as Chan Mahal. Skeldon had four cinemas, the Maya, the Novelty, the Metro, and Radio City. The Mohani Cinema used to be in number 64 Village. The Odeon was in Bush Lock Corentyne and the Star Cinema in Scottsburg. Now, let's travel back to Georgetown, go across the Demerara River, to Vredenhoop and explore some of the cinemas that used to be on that side. Here again, there is a major highway that runs parallel to the Atlantic, from Vredenhoop on the western side of the Demerara River to the town of Parika at the eastern bank of the Essequibo River. In Vredenhoop there was the Regal Cinema and the Roxy was in Leonora, about 10 miles away. Anna Katharina had two cinemas, but I can't recall their names. And in Parika, a town at the mouth of the Essequibo River, there was the Tiffany Cinema. There were also a few cinemas in villages along the west bank of the Demerara River. These were the Prince of Wales and Wales Estate, the Avon in Good Fortune, and the Starlight in Pudroin. Much further away from the city of Georgetown, in a place called Linden, there was the Palm Tree Cinema, which was on Burnham Drive, a main road in that town. Now, I'm pretty certain that there were some more that I don't know about. If you remember some names that I forgot to mention, please leave this information in the comments down below. So as we said at the beginning of this episode, the cinema was a really major form of entertainment, and the towns and villages of Guyana used to have their own little movie houses. Life back then was very easygoing for most people, and we found joy in simple things. But times changed, television and many other forms of entertainment became available, and sadly, going to the cinema became a thing of the past. But for some of us, those memories will never die. Do you agree? But here's some good news. Recently, the cinema appears to be returning to Guyana. West Central Movies opened recently in Leonora, West Coast Demerara. A second multi-screen movie theater is now open at the Amazonia Mall in Providence, East Bank. There is also a modern movie theater that is located at Turkine, Greater Georgetown, called Movietown. And very shortly, the Classic International Hotel and Suites in New Amsterdam will be launching its modern movie theater. Almost completed, with just a few minor works left, the facility would in essence be the stepping stone to bring the ancient county in line with Demerara when it comes to family entertainment. The 100-seat theater has the capability of not only 3D and 2D movies, but also Blu-ray. It will be the first of its kind in Berbice, with the last of old, beloved cinemas in the county closing its doors just 2 years ago. We hope you found today's episode interesting. I know that each of you have your own memories of the cinema. Please do share them with us. We really value your comments, and these help us to produce better material that we all can enjoy. So share, like, and comment on all that we offer. Thank you for spending some time with us on the Aaron Darcy Project, and please join us for the next episode. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. Goodbye for now.